In this short video, I'm going to talk about installing Python to a computer, a Windows 10 machine, which has nothing else installed. So we'll talk about installing Python um, for the shell. We'll talk about some of the other methods for running Python, just so you're aware of them. We'll install Python. We'll set the path variable. We'll run Python in the interactive mode. We'll install Notepad++ so that you can type small scripts. And we'll create a small script and run it just to make sure your environment is all set up. So first thing is methods for running Python. So we will be using the shell. So this is where we run scripts directly from the command prompt, so the PowerShell in Windows. And you can actually use the PowerShell in Windows if you just go down to the bottom and type PowerShell. Looks like this. And so we can run scripts directly in the PowerShell in Windows. And this is useful because this is the most bare bones way of running Python scripts. If you can run scripts this way, you can run any scripts you need to, and it will work in the most kind of different situations. Another way that you can run Python is from an IDE. So IDEs are things like PyCharms, Jupyter Notebook might be considered an IDE. And so these are things that if you look around online, you can find out more about. They are very useful. But for a number of my courses, you will need to be able to run Python from the shell. So unless you are in a course where you are required to use an IDE or need to use an IDE, or you're using this on your own and it's not related to a course, then you should be using the shell method for Python. And the final method for running Python scripts is through web IDEs. There are some web IDEs out there like CoCalc, where you can pretty much just type the code into the browser and run it. And these are kind of similar to normal IDE, but they're just through the browser. And so again, if you can run Python in the shell, you'll have no problem picking up an IDE or a web IDE and using that. So again, I'm going to teach you how to set up the environment, I guess in some sense the most difficult way, because that is the way that is the most applicable to the most number of other situations that you might run into. Okay, so that out of the way, I have a fresh installation of Windows 10 here that I'm going to demonstrate this on. I have Chrome installed, so I'm just going to use that. First thing that we're going to do is we're just going to go to look for Python 3.7, and Python 3.7 at the time of this video is one of the common versions. I think maybe they're up to 3.8 now. That's not so important. The big difference is 2.7, 3.4, 3.7, especially between anything that's what they call a major version, anything that's version 2 something and 3 something. Those are major differences. So it's very important that you install 3 point something. It could even be 3.4, but for this I'm going to show you how to install 3.7. Just make sure it's not 2 point something. Sometimes Python 2.7, it does work still, but there will be a few there's a few differences in the installation. So for this demonstration, I'm going to show you 3.7. So we're going to go down here. We're going to go to the, if you scroll down, make this a little bigger so we can see it. We want to do the Windows x86 executable installer. This will download the installer locally. And when you run it, you should get this. One important thing is you will need administrator privileges to install Python, usually, so that's important. Very important on this first screen is that we check add Python 3.7 to path. This is something that you used to have to do manually in Python 2, but you can do it automatically on the install here. And this is really important because if we don't click this, Windows won't recognize, and the PowerShell won't recognize that we have Python installed. And I'll show you kind of some of the symptoms of that. And I guess actually I can kind of demonstrate that now. If you're in Windows and you type Python at the command prompt or the PowerShell, and you get this Microsoft Store thing that pops up, this means that Python is not installed. Similarly, if I type Python 3, which is kind of a synonym, I get the same thing. So if that's the case, then you don't have Python installed. So I'm going to, once I make sure that these two are checked, I'm going to say install now. I'll get the administrator prompt. I'm going to say yes. And we will go through the installation process. So what's happening right now is Python is being downloaded. So we've already downloaded it, and it's being basically unpacked, and the program, Python is really just a program, is being put into the right place along with a couple of other libraries in Windows. Now, you should get this. You don't need to disable this path length limit. It shouldn't be a problem, so I'm just going to say close. So once Python is installed, let's close PowerShell and start it back up. We should be able to type Python, and we should get this. Now, two things. One, it's very important to close PowerShell and open it back up again, because when you install something to what they call the path, as in the path variable, PowerShell has to be refreshed for that to take effect. So now that we installed Python and we set it in the path variable automatically, when we type Python at the command prompt, Windows now recognizes it. So two things. One, Windows recognizes Python, and we can look here and we see that it's Python 3.7. It's very important that you check this, because if you already have a previous Python installation, it could say Python 2.7. This is what we call interactive mode. So we can actually type Python code here, and I can do that, but you will very rarely, if ever, write code in interactive mode. And the reason is because many times we're writing scripts that are multiple lines. So we generally will write a script in a separate file. So at this point, you can exit interactive mode. And the way we do that is just type exit as if it's a Python function like this, and enter. Okay, so we go back to the PowerShell. And it's very important to note the difference between being here at the command prompt, where we can type commands and we can run Python scripts, versus being in interactive mode, which looks like this, and it has these 3 greater than signs. Okay, those are very different. Okay, so again, command prompt versus Python within the Python program in interactive mode. Okay, so Python is installed, and that was really all that it took. So a couple other things. So the next step is that we need to install Notepad++. So we need a place to write our Python scripts. So I'm going to look for Notepad++, downloads. I guess I'll just download the most recent version. Here, this is x86. I'm going to download the installer. Run it. English. Next. I agree. Next. Next. Install. Okay, great. So that's it. So Notepad++ is really just a notepad, except it has some extra kind of features that are convenient for writing code. And remember, Python scripts are really nothing more than a text file. So once we get it installed, it should look like this. You can hold Control and scroll up, and that will actually make the text bigger or smaller. You can change the theme, style configurator, and we can go and change it to this bottom one, which is the dark style, which a lot of people like, so I want to show you that. You can create new text documents. You can close them up here. You can have multiple open. All right, so a couple of things about setting up Notepad++ for Python. So indentation in Python is very important. So a couple of things that we need to change in the settings. So settings are under, they moved it in a recent version, so we got to figure out where it is. So settings, preferences, and if you click language and you go to the right, the first thing that we need to do is change the tab settings. And in my courses, we use spaces instead of tabs. So, and that's a common convention. So what you should do is select Python and check replace by space. Make sure that that's checked. A lot of times this is not checked by default, so make sure that that's checked, and make sure your tab size is set to 4. Okay. Close. And so we're all set. All right, so I'm going to minimize this. And then I'm going to go and set up a directory where we can work on our Python scripts. So the way I'm going to do that is open the File Explorer. I'm going to go to Documents. I'm going to right-click in Documents, go to New Folder, and I'm just going to call it Python. Go into that folder, and this is the place where we're going to put all of our Python scripts. So throughout the course or courses, we will put them all here. Now, if you want, you can actually create multiple directories within the Python directory for maybe your different courses, things like that. But here I'm just going to do a kind of very simple version. It actually doesn't really matter where this folder is. I put it here for convenience under Documents. Okay, so creating a new Python script. So there's basically 2 ways to do it. One, you can right-click and go to New Text Document, and we can create the new text document that way, and we can rename it Python. One of the things that happens though in Windows is Windows hides the file extension. And so if you don't have this, if you have this feature on, you're going to want to go up here to View, Options, View, and you want to uncheck Hide Extensions for Known File Types. Okay, Apply, okay. And notice now we can see that this is actually a text file. And this is a very important step because it tends to be that's very confusing when you don't have this shown. Because if you rename a file .py, which is the Python extension, it will actually be mypythonfile.py.txt, but you can't see the .txt, so it looks like a Python file, but it's actually not. So it's important to do this because we want to be able to know the exact name of files. So I'm going to call this file test.py, and you'll notice Windows kind of gets concerned here. It says, are you sure you want to do this? And yes, we know what we're doing. And notice when I do that, it becomes a Python file. We get this little Python icon here. Okay. So, all right, right-click the file, and when you right-click the file, if you have Notepad++ installed, it will give you this option that says Edit with Notepad++. We can open it here, and notice it says test.py. The other way you can create a new Python file is you can just go to New, you can go to File, Save As, go to your Python directory, and say test2.py. like that. Okay, either way works. I like doing it from the Explorer context, although maybe it's a bit backwards, but it works for me. So let's create a very short Python script. So I'm going to just create a simple script that just prints my name here. Save that, go back to my PowerShell, and notice I'm in this directory. So one thing that's important is I can't run my Python script from this directory because this is not where my Python script is. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to close PowerShell. I'm going to go to the Explorer window. There's a kind of trick to open PowerShell in the directory that you're currently in. And the way to do that is to hold left shift on the keyboard and then right click in the white space of this place here, not on the files, but in the white space. And you'll get a special menu option that says Open PowerShell window here. And on newer versions of Windows, you'll actually get Open Linux shell here too as well. But that doesn't exist on everyone's computer. So I'm going to say Open PowerShell window here, and we'll get the PowerShell window. But notice now the path to the PowerShell in PowerShell is to our Python folder. Okay, and you can type pwd at any time, and it will tell you what the path is that you're in. Okay, so how do we run the Python script? Well, we just type Python like we did before, but then we type the name of the script. So one thing that is very helpful is you can type part of the name of the script and then press Tab on the keyboard, and it will auto-complete that name. If that name is wrong or that file doesn't exist in the path that you're in, it will not auto-complete the file. And so I suggest using Tab to auto-complete the file name because it alerts you as to whether or not the file is there or not, or you have the right name, that kind of thing. So I'm going to run the script, and it prints my message. Okay, so that's it. That's all that there is to it. And so now the workflow is essentially like this. You have Notepad++ open, you modify your script, and Control S or click the Save button, go back to your PowerShell window, press the up arrow on the keyboard, that recalls the last item, and enter, and it runs the new script. Okay, one other thing in PowerShell, you can change the properties. If you go to properties here, you can actually change the font size, so we can make it a little bit bigger. I can change the color, so the screen background is black, screen text, pop-up background, yeah. So we can kind of make things a little bit bigger here so that it's a little bit easier to read. And that's, again, right-click and then go to Properties. Okay, that's pretty much everything for getting your Python environment set up. Obviously, there's a couple of things that can go wrong along the way. So let me know if you have any questions. But for most people with a default Windows 10 installation, this will work. There are additionally a couple other text editors. There is Notepad++. There's also something called Atom. There's something called Sublime Text. I like Notepad++. I use it in class because the tabs and indentation, it has a lot of features. It also has some showing symbol features that are very useful. So that's what I would suggest. But if you're on a Mac, you're going to have to use Notepad++. I don't believe is available for Mac, so you may have to use Sublime or Atom instead. All right, so that's it. People with Windows 10 installations, this should be get you to where you need to be in order to run scripts.